Hey guys, welcome into the Stinkin Truth Podcast. Mark Schlereth alongside Mike Evans. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. However you watch and consume us, we appreciate that. Make sure you download and subscribe to our podcast right here, the Stinkin Truth. Mike, how are you, buddy?
I'm pumped up. It's our best time of the year. We're ready for the playoffs, but we do have some house cleaning to do before we turn totally to the playoffs. Some things happen at the end of the season. Couple of firings. Doug Peterson gone in Jacksonville. But what was maybe a surprise to some, Gerard Mayo in New England. Was that a surprise to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes and no. I suppose it was a surprise. I mean, first off, like, what did you do in New England? Like, the first thing to me, Mike, was you decided to go with Jacoby Brissett right off the bat for the first 5 or 6 weeks before you went to Drake May. And that one was curious, right? But I would think you would have the backing of the organization if you're going to make that decision. This one just seemed like Gerard Mayo was never really the choice of Robert Kraft in the first place. Like, he just wasn't the guy, and he wanted somebody else, but he couldn't get him that particular year. So he was just a fill-in, just a gap, a space holder, if you will. But that one does surprise me a little bit because, come on, shouldn't you get more than 1 year as you're developing a rookie quarterback and everything else? And you think of New England right now, wouldn't you think that New England's, because it looks like they solved the quarterback issue, wouldn't you think that that's a pretty good job to get if you're, looking for your first opportunity as a head coach or maybe a retread head coach? That would be a good opportunity and a good place to be for a coach?
Well, you did a New England game not that long ago. I think it was New England and Tennessee. So did you, being around them, get the sense that this thing had become so dysfunctional that Mayo was going to pay for what was happening? Because I mean, I look at it from afar. Bill Belichick did a lot of damage to that franchise on the way out, a lot of damage. And I wonder if anybody was going to be capable of really turning things around in a year.
So let me ask you this. How so? How did he do damage, do you think, in your mind?
Well, just look at the roster that he left. Look at the roster that he left. Look what he did to poor Mac Jones. I mean, Mac Jones comes off a pretty successful rookie season, and Belichick's answer to his second season is, okay, I'm going to help you get to the next level by giving you 2 offensive coordinators, right, one of whom was a defensive coordinator and the other was a special teams coach. Not exactly a brilliant move in hindsight.
Yeah, in hindsight, yeah. I mean,
well, even at the time,
when Belichick decided to do it, was forward thinking. Like, this has never been done before. Like, it's either going to set NFL back, decades, or it's going to move the NFL forward. One or the other. Right. There's no in between on this one. I think that they have had a really poorly constructed roster. They've had a lot of misses. There's a lot of guys that haven't, panned out necessarily. But I just am surprised that Mayo didn't get another opportunity. I'm surprised that he didn't get an opportunity to grow into being a head coach, because there's a lot of growing pains that go into becoming a head coach for the very first time. And that's why I think most of the time, most of these guys we see fail early and then they succeed their second go around when they get another opportunity. But one and done head coach, we just don't see that very often. Well, I guess we saw it in Denver with Nathaniel Hackett, right?
Well, sometimes it's just so bad that you just look at it and say, sorry, we can't give you another year. The Jets situation, when you hear the names being mentioned, please, if the football gods are listening, please make this so. Rex Ryan return? Come on. Sign me up.
That would be awesome.
Wouldn't it?
Rex Ryan back to the Jets. Let's go eat a snack. I mean, that would be tremendous. And it's going to take somebody like Rex Ryan to be able to, overcome the dumpster fire that the New York Jets are. Somebody that can have that kind of authority there. That would be great. I mean, it's really interesting that, that you've got to have a strong personality there. The other thing is you've got to have somebody that can push back on just the tomfoolery of ownership. I mean, the stuff that goes on there, the reports that the owner's 17-year-old son makes decisions over there, and, Woody Johnson berates players, and like all the noise coming out of that locker room, and the dysfunction and the lack of professionalism, the lack of understanding. I will tell you, just watching that, I did a Jets game a couple of weeks ago, and watching the dysfunction on that offense, watching just the malfeasance of coaching and the way they went about trying to develop a run game, it's embarrassing. I mean, it's flat out embarrassing. So you need somebody with a strong voice, most importantly, that has a strong sense of identity. And one thing about Rex Ryan believes in, remember when he was with the Jets, ground and pound, baby, ground and pound. And Mark Sanchez and the Jets went to 2 AFC championships, man. Says a lot about what Rex Ryan, and that's not derogatory towards Sanchez. That is saying, hey, man, we got a young quarterback. The way we're going to win is we're going to run the hell out of the football. We're going to play stellar defense, and this is what's going to take us to the promised land. And, man, they almost got to a Super Bowl doing that. So a guy with a strong sense of identity and what he wants his football team to be, Rex Ryan is that guy. I understand that. That makes sense to me.
Prediction for what happens with Mike McCarthy in Dallas.
Like if I'm Mike McCarthy, okay, so the Dallas Cowboys have kind of exclusive negotiating window until January 14th, right? And now the Bears are asking for permission to interview Mike McCarthy. So one, should the Cowboys give him permission? Well, I think you got to give him permission, right? You decided not to sign him. You let him become what do they call it? A lame duck coach. I almost called him a deadbeat coach, but that's something else. I was searching there. The hamster was just going. Right. Deadbeat coach. No.
Lame duck.
So he's a lame duck coach. Like, either sign him to a long-term deal right now, or let him start going out and interviewing. Let him start, figuring out what's next for Mike McCarthy. But come on, of the jobs that are out there right now, I'll just ask you, if the jobs that are out there. So what are the jobs that are out there right now? We've got Chicago, obviously, right?
Chicago, Patriots, Jets,
Jags. Of those teams right there, Chicago certainly looks like the best opportunity, right?
Yep.
I mean, they've got some really good defensive players. They've got some very talented offensive players. They need to fix their line of scrimmage on the offensive side of the ball, but certainly looks like maybe the best opportunity to have success right away. So yeah, I would think that might be the best overall job. But for Mike McCarthy, of course, he should be able to go out and interview for that job.
We'll get into the matchups as we move deeper into the week, but just a couple of quick thoughts about the teams that are going to be playing this weekend. I know the rules are the rules, and it's not like it was just made up on the fly. Everybody's eyes were wide open going in to what the situation is. But still, the Minnesota Vikings go from being a 14-2 team, one win away from having the top seed in the NFC. They lose in a very difficult place to play against a very good team, an equally 14-2 team in Detroit, and they get bounced all the way down to the 5th seed where they have to go out on the road and play a 9-7 or 10. What was the Rams record? It doesn't matter.
10-7.
10-7. Have to go out on the road and play. It's blatantly unfair. I know those are the rules, but do you still feel bad for the Vikings?
I don't feel bad at win. Dude, you had a chance to win.
All you did was win all year.
Not when it counted.
And so your punishment is to get bounced behind a 10-7 team?
Okay,
you went 14-3?
You went 14-3, right?
Yeah.
You lost to Detroit twice, and you lost to the Rams. I mean, I'm sorry, By the way, that was supposed to be the game of the century. That was supposed to be the game of the year. Sunday Night Football, Week 18. 14-2 teams. The winner gets the 1 seed. The loser drops to the 5 seed, goes on the road. I mean, just show up. Minnesota Vikings got their ass kicked. And by the way, not only did they get their ass kicked, but they completely went away from what they've done. You know that they had gone for it on offense, 4th down. They had gone for it on the season 10 times. They ended up going for it 3 times. They were 0-3 in that game. So you basically tried to become the Detroit Lions. You went away from what you've done all season long, got away from your identity, and got throttled in that game. And oh, by the way, dude, let me just tell you this. For all you that watch this podcast, I'm about to piss you off. And maybe you unsubscribe. I don't know. But for all of those out there that watch NFL football and are like, yeah, if it wasn't for that knee injury, I'd have made it to the NFL. No, you wouldn't. You were a pussy. Okay, so here's the deal.
This is not helping.
Doesn't help? No?
Keep going. We're already, you're halfway down the road. You might as well keep going.
Here's the deal. Alex Anzalone. Like, everybody would play the game if it were easy and there were no consequences. Alex Anzalone fractures his arm, has surgery on it. He had a big picture of that arm, that scar right down his arm. I mean, it's all stitches, right? Had a plate put in it. 5-6 weeks later, he's back on the practice or back on the game. He's just dispensing justice, taking on guards, shedding them, tackling people, covering one-on-one. And his tweet was, he showed a picture of his arm with that big gnarly scar down it and goes, everybody wants to be a dog until you're asked to do dog shit, right? And everybody thinks they can play. Yeah, I get this all the time, that, like, especially when I was younger, not as much as anymore. Maybe it's just because I'm old and fat. But people would stop me and say, hey, you're a pretty big guy. Did you play football? And I'd be like, yeah. And then they'd be like, did you play college? I'd be like, yeah, I played college. Where'd you play college? Idaho. And that was usually good enough. All right, see you later. Or I'd get they said I'd have gone pro if it wasn't for this knee injury. Oh, really? Is that what they say? Is that what they say? Nope, you wouldn't have. Because you're not willing to do what players are willing to do. It's part stupidity and part, the lunacy. You got to be somewhat crazy to play this game. And that defense against Minnesota dispensed justice. And Alex Anzalone ties the front end and the back end together. They're a man-to-man team. They went after those receivers. I mean, you would think you're playing against Minnesota. Hey, man, we got to get out of the man-to-man. You know what the Detroit Lions is the biggest strength? We are what we are. And this is how we've gotten to this point, playing this way. And guess what? This is how we're going to continue to play. We're better than they are. The Globo Gym of NFL teams. We're better than you, and we know it. And they just lined up and said, we'll play you man to man, and we don't give a crap. And you've got Addison, and you've got Jefferson, and you've got Hawkinson, and you've got Jones. And you know what? We don't give a shit. We're Detroit. Let's go. And boy, I tell you what, 31-9 beatdown of the Minnesota Vikings.
Stink, if you're a Viking fan, are you worried at all that so much was put into this winner-take-all showdown with Detroit to not only get beat, but to get beat the way that they did and have to face the fact that you go 14-3 and the best you can be is a 5th seed on the road at the Rams? Is this a classic potential for a letdown this week for the Vikings?
I don't know about a letdown, Mike. I think you're going to go face a team that, is what the number, what are they, the 3 seed, 4 seed?
3 seed.
So
3 seed.
You're going to go they're the 4 seed.
Excuse me.
4 seed, right? 5 versus 4.
5 versus 4. Yep.
So you're going to go down. You're going to go down to L.A. Now, the good news is L.A. doesn't necessarily have a big fan base, right? But you're going to go down to L.A. and play the Rams, who have Matthew Stafford, have Cooper Kupp, have Puka Nacua, have Kyron Williams, and oh, by the way, have a bunch of young guys on defense that can flat out play and can rush the passer. This, to me, is one of those classic, we always say, which team does nobody want to play? And it's always kind of one of those cliche things we talk about. Dude, people like the Rams are scary good because of all the different factors I just talked about, and the fact that Matthew Stafford, like if we want to talk about who's most apt to be able to deal with a blitz happy, Minnesota Vikings and Brian Flores and deal with all those issues, it's got to be Matthew Stafford. So, yeah, like this is a concern. And oh, by the way, like even though the Vikings all season long were winning football games, nobody inside, like none of us as kind of quote unquote national analysts ever really gave them credit, and it really pissed off Minnesota people, right? Because we were always saying, yeah, but I don't know, am I not ready? Sam Darnold missed a bunch of throws. Sam Darnold was not good in that game against Detroit. And is that an outlier, or is that because, that's more of who they are, and they just were able to overcome all those things all season long? I don't know about you, Mike, but I don't think Minnesota's in a great space right now.
Yep. Yeah, and maybe I used the wrong word, a letdown, but it just seems like this is it's a precarious position for the Vikings, despite having a 14-3 record. If you are Mike Tomlin, do you make a switch at quarterback this week?
Yes, I do. I mean, I just think I'll be honest with you. Like, they dropped a lot of balls the other night against Cincinnati, but this is the last 4 weeks. They have not been good. And going into that game against Cincinnati Saturday night, they had lost 3 games in a row by double digits. Offensively, they have not produced. And Russ is back to taking a bunch of sacks. Now, did protections break down? Yeah, they did. But you got to throw the ball away, and you got to throw it in the middle of the football field. And, the things that have been hindering him throughout the course of his career have reared their ugly head again and are hindering him once again. 12 sacks in the last 3 games he's taken. And so you look at their last 31 drives, Mike. Their last 31 drives that had a sack in those 31 drives. They've scored 3 touchdowns in 31 drives. They're scoring at less than a 10% clip. When you take a sack, it's worse than taking a penalty. Sacks kill football drives. Yep. And it's an issue. Now, they had some struggles in protection. They had some struggles on the edge. But your quarterback has to bail you out of some of those things. Either throw it away or step up underneath that and get away from it, and then, get on the move and make some things happen. I almost think, like, Mike Tomlin pat himself on the back. He stuck his chest out. When they were 4-2 and he decided to go with Russ, and a lot of people, even inside the organization, were like, oh, I don't think this is the right decision. Mike puffed his chest out and goes, this is why they pay me the big money, and dropped the mic, right? And then Russ played really well for a couple of weeks, and everybody goes, wow, Mike Tomlin's a genius. He's the coach of the year, blah, 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 blah. Well, I tell you what, you put your big Randy Marsh balls out there the last time, put them out there again. If you went to Justin Fields, because I will say this. Do I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to beat the Baltimore Ravens this weekend? No, I don't. I don't think so. Do I think at least Justin Fields gives them a fighting chance over Russell Wilson? Yeah, I do. So I don't think he's going to make that move. I don't think he's going to have those Randy Marsh in a wheelbarrow type testicles. I don't. But do I think it's going to give? Do I think Russ is going to go into Baltimore and win? And no, I don't. Do I think at least with Justin Fields and that QB run game and some things they haven't necessarily prepped for and aren't kind of ready for a steady diet of, do I think that would give you a better chance to win? I do. Maybe it's just because I've watched Russ play the last 4 weeks and it just reminds me of what he was in Denver, and I know you can't win that way.
Speaking of Denver, of all the playoff teams, Denver Broncos the most surprising?
Got to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Got to be when you consider the fact that Vegas had them winning 5.5 games, and anybody who put a power rankings roster list out there, which were all the networks, had the Broncos ranked as the worst,
29th, 30th, 31st. I mean, yeah. Basically between 29 and 32.
Yeah, I kept seeing the Carolina Panthers having a better roster than the Broncos. And you're like, come on, dude. And I told you, I'm like, just because you don't know the name, because we don't have name value doesn't mean that this is not a decent roster. And, people thought I was crazy. Good for Sean Payton. What a hell of a coaching job. What a hell of a scouting job. Deciding that Bo Nix is my guy over. And I'll tell you, I've talked to Sean about this a bunch. Bo Nix was his number one guy. Now, to be fair, they knew Caleb Williams was going to Chicago. Mm-hmm. So they didn't spend a lot of time on Caleb Williams. But of all the quarterbacks they picked, Bo Nix was their guy to orchestrate the offense that he wanted to orchestrate. Now, obviously, I think that Jaden Daniels is going to be the rookie of the year, right? And he deserves that, no question about it. But the next best guy has been Bo Nix, and his numbers are incredible.
Yeah.
Just absolutely incredible. So what a great job of coaching. And now, Mike, you're playing on house money.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're playing on house money, it's amazing how much it frees you up as a player. And I always go back to our Super Bowl when I was in Denver against the Green Bay Packers. I got to play in 3 of them. 2 of them, we were big favorites. Super Bowl 26 against the Buffalo Bills, Washington Redskins against the Bills, 8.5 point favorites. And Super Bowl 33 against the Atlanta Falcons, the Denver Broncos against the Falcons, 8.5 point favorites. After those games were over, there was more relief than there was anything else. Like, thank God that's over, right? Thank God we didn't screw that one up.
Right.
Kicking off against the Green Bay Packers I think the game opened up, we were 13-point underdogs. We kicked off at 11.5-point underdogs. Winning that game was euphoric because that us against the world mentality. So for the Denver Broncos, man, they've already accomplished way more than anybody thought they would. You run into Buffalo and you're like, all right, let's just go. Hey, we're going to go for it on 4th down. We're going to orchestrate a fake punt. Yeah, why not? So this is kind of an interesting game to me. Ultimately, does anybody expect the Broncos to go into Buffalo and beat the Buffalo Bills? Probably not. But I think that's a really strong position to play from as a player, being that big underdog going on the road. That's kind of a fun place to play from.
We'll get into the matchups later on when we do the podcast later in the week. But as you look at the playoffs right now, which player, coach, who has the most pressure on him going into these playoffs? And you just start thinking about some of the nominees, the candidates. You got Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Mike Tomlin. We were just talking about Tomlin hasn't won a playoff game in forever.
Yeah.
So if you had to pick one, who has the most pressure on him to deliver in these playoffs?
Yeah. Tomlin hasn't won a playoff game since 2016, but I just don't think they're a great team. So I don't know that there's a lot of pressure. Most people had them picked as the 3rd or 4th team coming out of the NFC North or the AFC North, So I don't think there's a lot of pressure that way on Mike Tomlin. The Baltimore Ravens have had success. John Harbaugh's had success. Lamar has not been great in the playoffs, so there's a lot of pressure to be good in the playoffs. But I think the team and the organization with the most pressure overall has got to be Buffalo. The history of the Buffalo Bills, the fact that you've never won a championship, all those things. So in the AFC, I'd probably go with the Buffalo Bills and the history, 4 straight championship games. They got, torched in all 4 of them. Well, the first one, I guess, was close. It was wide right. They missed that one. But the rest of them, they all got torched in. So I would think that they in the AFC would be the organization with the most pressure.
And therefore, Josh Allen with the most pressure.
Yeah, therefore, Josh Allen to lead them to the promised land. So that makes sense to me, although I think Lamar's got a lot of pressure on himself to play really well in the playoffs. So I think those 2 guys. I think the most pressure, believe it or not, is the number 1 seed in the NFC. Detroit's been the best team all along, and there's this – hey, they've had a lot of injuries, a lot of guys on IR, this, that, and the other, and you feel like, oh, gosh, there's got to be some pressure there. But, they always play with that, hey, we're going for it on 4th down, we're faking punt. We got Dan Campbell.
So Detroit more than Philly? Dan Campbell maybe more than Nick Sirianni? Jared Goff more than Jalen Hurts? I think I'd argue that Detroit's still kind of in that lovable phase. Whereas Philadelphia,
right?
I don't know. I think I might counter with Philly has more pressure on them.
Well, Philly definitely, from the local market standpoint, regardless of what happens to Detroit, they love. I don't know if you saw Aaron Glenn go to a Pistons game the other day and be introduced to the Pistons game, and the crowd, standing ovation, crowd went crazy. Aaron Glenn being the defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, a former New York Jet, he played for a long time, but the crowd just went nuts for him, right? So you're right, they're still in that honeymoon phase. If Philadelphia were to lose, there'd be pitchforks and lanterns going straight to the NovaCare Center or whatever it is they practice at. But
if they don't make it to the NFC Championship game, at least, is Sirianni out?
I don't think so, Mike. I don't know. I mean, there is pressure, though. Think about this. Jalen Hurts got hurt in Week 16, the second drive of that game against the Washington Commanders with a concussion. He has yet to clear concussion protocol. Now, we'll see. Maybe Wednesday he clears and he's back at practice. But the guy hasn't practiced in 2 weeks. So, that one, we all assume that he's going to play. But what if he doesn't? Where are we at? I don't know. I assume he's going to be fine. I assume he's going to play. But that's got to concern you, too, as a Philadelphia Eagle fan.
Yep. Well, it's going to be fun. We'll dive into the matchups, and I get a chance at a clean slate. You won the regular season title. Congratulations. You dominated me in the picks. But now's where the real games matter.
Yeah, I almost picked at a alarming rate of 65%.
You're good.
Yeah.
On your breakfast ball show, you're wearing the sweatshirt.
Yeah.
Your guy, Danny Parkins, gets all the credit for his picks. I think didn't you have a better percentage? Did you bring that up at all?
No. Well,
flashing the money and coming in on his throne. Did anybody conveniently mention that actually your picks were better this year?
No. And by the way we do it too, we alternate weeks. So there are some weeks where 3 games are taken off the board.
Right.
Which might actually go against the argument because you're so bad at picking. So bad at picking that you leave better picks on the board for me. So maybe that's not a disadvantage now that I think about it.
I'd like to think that I'm kind of like the Chiefs last year, just kind of coasting through the season and then flip the switch when it matters most.
The difference is, though, the Chiefs were coming off a world championship when they coasted through the season. You got your ass kicked last year, too.
Details.
All right.
Don't worry.
Hey, for everybody involved,
a much different me starting on Thursday.
For everybody involved in the Stinkin Truth podcast, we appreciate you guys for listening. Thank you so much, and we'll be back with you guys next week.